A dusty grand piano sits silent in the Charleston mansion. She whispers, "It hasn't been played in years." The tall black restorer touches the keys. Broken, haunting notes still bloom into melody. Her breath catches. That sound wasn't in the sheet music. His eyes lift, steady, warm. Maybe it was just for you. She leans closer, voice trembling. "I want you to be mine." The baby grand piano sat like a monument to silence in the middle of the living room, its once glossy mahogany dulled by dust and years of neglect. Afternoon sunlight filtered through the tall arched windows of the Whitmore house, catching faint motes in the air. To Clara Whitmore, the piano was not just furniture. It was memory, inheritance, and grief wrapped into one. She stood with her arms crossed, her curvy frame draped in a flowing ivory sundress that cinched at her waist. The dress did little to hide the weight she carried in her chest. Not just her full figure, but the heaviness of loss. Her grandmother, Eleanor, had filled these walls with music for decades, commanding this very Steinway with a grace that had made neighbours pause on the sidewalk to listen. But Eleanor had been gone for 3 years now, and the house had fallen into a strange hush. Clara had inherited both the sprawling mansion and the piano. The house had good bones, but keeping it afloat as a freelance designer stretched her finances razor thin. The piano she couldn't bear to part with. It was the last piece of her grandmother she could touch. But it sat broken, several keys dead, its voice strangled. Clara had promised herself for months she would call someone to restore it, yet the cost always loomed in her mind like an impossible storm. The sharp ring of the doorbell startled her. Clara smoothed her dress, inhaled, and tried to summon a smile. She expected the elderly piano tuner her neighbour had recommended. Some grey-haired man with spectacles, perhaps. Instead, when she opened the door, she froze. A tall black man stood on her porch, early 30s, broad shoulders filling out a simple work shirt and dark trousers. A leather tool case hung from one strong hand. His other hand brushed a curl of short-cropped black hair from his forehead. His eyes, deep, soulful brown, met hers with a quiet steadiness that caught her off guard. "Miss Whitmore?" His voice was low, warm and professional. "Yes," she managed. "I'm Daniel Carter, Carter and Torres Piano Restoration. You called about a Steinway in need of repair?" Clara blinked. He wasn't at all what she'd pictured. Too young, too striking, too alive for the faded house behind her. "Yes, of course. Please, come in." As he stepped into the foyer, his gaze lifted to the chandelier overhead, then drifted along the ornate crown moulding. Beautiful home. These old Charleston houses, they have soul. Clara felt the corner of her lips twitch into a smile. "Thank you, it was my grandmother's. She loved this house more than anything." "And the piano?" She led him into the living room, where the grand waited like a sleeping beast. Daniel's expression shifted the instant he saw it. His professional mask softened into reverence. He walked toward the instrument, as though approaching a patient, his large hands brushing the polished lid before lifting it carefully. "Steinway Model M," he murmured, almost to himself. "From the early 50s, if I'm not mistaken." 1952, Clara said. "My grandmother bought it new. She played for the Charleston Symphony for decades." Daniel's brows lifted. A fine choice. She had good taste. He lowered himself onto the bench and pressed a key. A thin, sour note wheezed out. He tried another. Silence. Then a few more, coaxing what sound he could. His face tightened, but his touch remained gentle. "When was the last time it was serviced?" Clara shrugged, embarrassed. "Before she got sick. 4 years, maybe more." He nodded gravely, examining the hammers, the strings, the action. "It needs more than tuning. Keys are sticking, felts are worn, and the action needs adjusting. But the bones," he tapped the soundboard with affection, "the bones are solid. It's worth restoring." Clara hesitated. How much? For a complete restoration? 1,500. Her stomach dropped. She forced her smile to stay. "Oh." Daniel's gaze flickered over her face, reading her easily. His tone gentled. "If that's more than you want to take on right now, I could do a basic repair and tuning for 400. Make it playable again." She bit her lip, torn between longing and practicality. "Can I think about it?" "Of course." He shut the lid and stood, wiping his hands lightly on a cloth. Then, almost shyly, he asked, "Do you play?" Clara gave a little laugh. "Not really. A few lessons as a girl. I never got past the clumsy stage." "That's a shame," he said, his voice low, thoughtful. "This piano deserves to be played." Something in the way he said it made her chest tighten. "Do you?" His hands hovered unconsciously near the keys. He hesitated, then glanced at her. "Would you mind?" "Please," she whispered. Daniel sat again, his fingers falling naturally onto the ivory. He began to play. Despite the broken condition, a melody unfurled. Haunting, tender, alive. Clara didn't recognize the piece, but it filled the hollow room with something she hadn't felt in years. Not just sound, but presence. When he stopped, the silence was almost unbearable. That, Clara's voice trembled, that wasn't in the sheet music. Daniel smiled, his first real smile since entering. It lit his face, softened his jaw, and revealed the warmth behind his calm eyes. "Maybe it was just for you." The words hung heavy between them. Clara's throat tightened. She wasn't used to men disarming her with kindness. Most in her life had spoken in transactions. Boyfriends who wanted her to be less attached to the past, colleagues who measured her by what she earned. But Daniel looked at her as if she, like the piano, might be worth restoring. She cleared her throat, blinking back sudden heat in her eyes. "Where did you learn to play like that?" "My father. He's been restoring pianos for 40 years. I studied performance at the College of Charleston, but I realized I loved the instruments as much as the music." He looked down at his calloused fingers, long and graceful despite the roughness of his work. Clara thought of her grandmother's pearls still tucked in her dresser upstairs, of the weight of a house too big for one woman, of bills that seemed to multiply while her heart longed for something that had no price. "This piano," Daniel said softly, "deserves a voice again, and so do you." She met his gaze. For a moment, the dust and silence of the house seemed to recede. Something new stirred, as if the first note of a forgotten song had been struck. Daniel returned the next morning with the kind of dawn that makes Charleston glow. Soft light draped over iron balconies, live oaks tossing lacework shadows across the sidewalks. Clara heard his knock and felt her heartbeat lift like a bird startled from a branch. She told herself it was because of the piano. She knew better. He stood on the porch in a charcoal work jacket, the leather tool case in one hand and a narrow wooden crate in the other. "Good morning, Miss Whitmore." "It's Clara," she said, stepping aside. "And good morning." The words came out warmer than she intended. He noticed. His smile flickered, modest and bright. They walked to the living room. The Steinway waited with its lid closed, a sleeping animal under light. Daniel set the crate on the floor, then opened the grand with a familiar, reverent motion. "I brought some replacement felts and a couple of hammers," he said. "We'll start with the worst offenders." Clara hovered, then caught herself. Coffee or tea? Coffee would be great. When she returned with 2 steaming mugs, Daniel had already slid the piano away from the wall with careful leverage, the wheels whispering over old wood. He was all economy of motion. No wasted steps, no performance, just sure hands and quiet focus. He placed a folded quilt beneath the fullboard, arranged tools in a neat line, and removed the action in a single fluid sequence that made Clara gasp. "I didn't know it came out like that." "It's the heart," he said. "Keys talk to hammers, hammers talk to strings, strings talk to the soundboard. If the heart is tired, nothing else can sing." "Do you always talk about pianos like people?" He glanced up, eyes warm. "Only the ones worth saving." Clara felt the comment land and rearrange something inside her. She perched on the edge of the chaise with her mug and watched him work. Felt shavings gathered like red petals on his fingers as he trimmed and shaped. Every now and then he paused to listen, to the dull thud of a tired hammer, the whisper of a sluggish damper, and then made a precise, unfussy change. The room filled with tiny sounds, soft tapping, a faint rasp of sandpaper, the metallic sigh when he brushed a string. "Tell me about your grandmother," he said without looking up. Clara swallowed. Eleanor Whitmore. She believed in linen napkins and stubborn kindness. She taught children who couldn't afford lessons and scolded the rich for clapping on the wrong beat. Daniel chuckled, then aligned a hammer, his brow furrowing. "Sounds like someone who would have made me practice scales." "She would have adored that you work with your hands," Clara said. "She used to say we live in a world of shortcuts. Craft is an act of love." He stilled, the slightest movement of his jaw. "My mother said something like that too." "What was she like?" A quiet beat, then soft voice, strong spine. She sat beside me at our old upright and told me to listen to the space between notes. He set the hammer, tested it, then nodded. She passed when I was in college. I'm sorry. Me too, he said gently, and the conversation settled into a hush that felt like sunlight on skin. By midday, the room smelled faintly of felt and metal. Daniel wiped his hands and said, "Try a few notes? I told you I'm terrible." "I know." His grin was easy, not unkind. "Humour me." Clara slid onto the bench and pressed a key. The tone that answered was round a trua, not perfect, but promising. She tried another, then a simple chord. It chimed, unsteady and beautiful, like a child's first laugh. Her eyes stung. "It sounds alive." Daniel's voice lowered. "Because it is." She turned to him, too quickly, and their faces came closer than she expected. The brief nearness, his cedar-scented jacket, the earnestness in his eyes, sent a soft jolt through her. She reached for her mug to cover the moment, found only air, and decided to stand instead. "About the restoration," she said, avoiding his gaze. "I want to do it. But the cost." He rose, rubbing a thumb over a faint line of graphite on his hand. "We can do it in stages, or a payment plan. I'm not in the business of letting good instruments die because someone has bills." Relief and embarrassment collided. "You don't even know me." "I know what this piano means to you," he said. "That's enough for me to meet you halfway." She exhaled, a tremor of gratitude running through it. "Thank you." He nodded, then cleared his throat. "I can start a full-action regulation tomorrow, if you're comfortable with me coming by in the mornings." "I work from home," she said. "I'll be here. I can stay out of the way." "I don't mind you watching," he said, and the honesty of it warmed her more than the coffee had. The next day, he arrived with a partner, an older man with bright, amused eyes and a forearm scar shaped like a comma. "Miguel Torres," he said, shaking Clara's hand. "I'm the other name on the door." "Clara Whitmore," she replied. "Thank you both for doing this." Miguel winked. "Heard whispers about a stubborn Steinway and a house that refuses to be quiet. Couldn't stay away." The two men moved as if they'd worked in the same body for years. Where Daniel was precise, Miguel was intuitive. Where Miguel leaned, Daniel steadied. They spoke in shorthand. 2 mil here, split that capstan, leave the let-off, and settled into a rhythm that made time blur. Clara brought them coffee and settled at the dining table with her laptop pretending to work. In truth, she kept listening. Snatches of melody threaded through their tasks. Daniel humming while he filed, Miguel whistling a blues line while he cleaned key pins. It felt like the house was learning to breathe again. "Do you mind if I try something?" Daniel asked in the afternoon. He cleaned his hands and sat at the bench, playing a quick ladder of broken chords. "This note's still sulking," he muttered, then adjusted a spring with a jeweler's screwdriver and tried again. The chord came out even, and he smiled without looking up, the smile of someone solving a puzzle the world had set just for him. "Where did you learn to be patient?" Clara asked, drawn by that smile to the edge of the piano. He considered. "Pianos teach patience. They don't care about your timeline. They care about being listened to." "You're very good at that," she said before she could stop herself. "At listening? At making me feel like I'm not ridiculous for wanting this." She said, gesturing vaguely, the house, the piano, the life she kept trying to hold together with grace and duct tape. He met her eyes, and something unguarded moved across his face. "Wanting beauty is never ridiculous." Miguel coughed theatrically from behind the piano. "On that note," he grinned, shameless about the pun, "I'm grabbing lunch. You two keep flirting, regulating. I'll be back." Clara felt heat in her cheeks. Daniel cleared his throat. "Ignore him. He thinks he's charming." "He is," she said, then softer. "So are you." Silence pressed close, companionable and charged. He shifted on the bench, leaving a space. "Sit," he said. "I want to try something. Place your hands here." She obeyed, her fingers awkward on cool ivory. He placed his hands lightly over hers, guiding. The contact was feather-light, respectful, and somehow more intimate than a kiss. "Relax your wrists," he murmured. "Pretend your hands are being pulled by the notes, not pushing them." She tried, failed, laughed. He laughed too, a low, warm sound. Again, breathe. They found a simple pattern, C major, slow, broken chords. Under his guidance, the piano answered with a confidence that felt borrowed, then earned. The instrument wasn't suddenly perfect, and neither was she, but the sound that rose between them had sincerity. It vibrated in the ribs where truth lives. "This is what regulation does," he said softly over her shoulder. Makes the touch honest. You don't have to fight the instrument to say what you mean." Her throat tightened. "I don't want to fight anything anymore," she said, surprising herself. "Not the house, not the bills, not men who want me smaller. I'm tired of apologizing for taking up space." He didn't rush to fill the quiet. He let it sit, respected. Then, "Keep taking it," he said. "Space, sound, whatever you need." She turned her head, and he was right there. The distance between their mouths was the width of a breath. Nothing at all. He didn't move. Neither did she. It wasn't a hesitation born of doubt. It was reverence, like the half-second after striking a note when you honor the ring before reaching for the next. Miguel's footsteps broke the spell a moment later, boisterous and unapologetic. "Shrimp po' boys," he announced, lifting a paper bag like a trophy, "and an iced tea that could resuscitate a ghost." They ate at the dining table, grease paper crinkling, the house full of the ordinary symphony of lunch. Miguel told a story about a saloon upright that had survived 3 hurricanes and 1 bar fight. Daniel listened with fond exasperation. Clara laughed more than she had in months. When the men packed up for the day, the piano was still mid-surgery, action on a quilt, keys numbered in tidy pencil. Yet the room felt different, lighter, expectant. "How's tomorrow?" Daniel asked from the doorway. "Come early," she said before she could think better of it. "The light is good in the mornings." He nodded. "Then we'll wake her with the sun." After the door closed, Clara stood in the living room and pressed a single key, one of the ones Daniel had coaxed back from silence. The note bloomed and lingered, not perfect, but clear enough to make her skin prickle. She thought of his hands over hers, of the way he looked at things he intended to honor, not fix for his own pride. At her desk, invoices waited, an email from a client flagged in frustrated red. She answered what she could, declined a job that wanted twice the work for half the rate, then closed the laptop and walked back to the piano. She placed her palm flat on the polished lid and felt the faint hum still fading in the wood. "You're coming back," she whispered, to the instrument, to the house, to herself. Outside, the live oaks swayed. Somewhere down the block, a child practiced trumpet, 3 confident notes and a brave mistake. Clara smiled, turned out the lights, and let the house hold its breath for morning. The following morning broke golden and heavy with Charleston heat, the kind that made the Spanish mosque listen. Clara opened her front door before Daniel had a chance to knock, startling herself with the eagerness in the gesture. He stood there with a thermos in one hand, his tool case in the other, and a smile that seemed to know more than it said. "You read my mind," she said, pointing at the thermos. "Sweet tea," he confirmed. "Miguel insisted I bring some, said it would earn me extra points." "You already have more points than you realize," Clara blurted, then flushed. She stepped aside quickly. "Come in." The Steinway waited with its action spread out neatly on cloth. Daniel moved to it like a man approaching something sacred, setting down his case and rolling his sleeves. His forearms flexed as he lifted the action, and Clara looked away before she lingered too long. She busied herself pouring tea into 2 glasses, her pulse oddly quick. He worked in silence for the first hour, tuning hammers, adjusting levers. Clara sat at the bench beside him when he asked, pressing keys as he made small adjustments. Their shoulders brushed occasionally, each contact sending sparks under her skin. "Better," he murmured as the tone rounded out. "Still feels stiff." He leaned close, his hand guiding hers again. "Relax your wrist. Let the key pull you, not the other way." She obeyed, clumsy but willing. The sound was smoother this time, a small victory. She laughed, the sound easing some of the tension. "You're a natural," he said. "I'm a disaster." "No," Daniel corrected gently, his eyes on hers. "You just stopped too soon when you were younger. Most people quit before the piano begins to answer them." Something about the way he said answer struck her deeply, as if he weren't talking about music at all. They broke for lunch, sitting on the back porch with sandwiches Clara had thrown together. She caught him studying the garden, overgrown roses pushing through wrought iron rails, a fountain long dry. "This place has a kind of dignity," he said, "even when it's worn." "It's exhausting sometimes," Clara admitted. "The upkeep, the memories, I feel like I'm drowning in inheritance." He turned toward her. "Or maybe you're standing in the middle of something extraordinary, and you just need to remember it isn't all yours to carry alone." Clara blinked at him. caught between gratitude and the sudden ache of wanting him closer. She pushed the feeling down, retreating into safer ground. "You sound like my grandmother." "Wise woman," he said simply. By the afternoon, the Steinway began to sound less like a corpse and more like a heartbeat. Daniel tested octaves, adjusting, nodding. Finally, he gestured for Clara. "Your turn." Her fingers trembled as she pressed the keys. The piano's voice, still imperfect but clear, filled the room. She stumbled over a simple melody and frustration flared. "I told you I can't." He covered her hand with his own, stilling her. "Clara, breathe." Her chest lifted, fell. She tried again. This time the notes came cleaner. Not perfect, but music. "See?" Daniel's voice was low, close. "It's in you." Clara turned her head slightly, and suddenly his face was inches from hers. The air seemed to pulse between them. Her lips parted, not in words, but in something closer to surrender. Daniel froze, every muscle in him taut with restraint. His hand slipped away, giving her space. The moment held, then passed. He cleared his throat. "You should practice 10 minutes a day. Not about speed, about listening." Clara nodded, throat tight. That evening, after he'd gone, she sat at the piano alone. The keys felt different under her hands now, not just wood and ivory, but possibility. She pressed them slowly, listening, feeling. Yet her thoughts weren't on scales or sound. They were on Daniel's hand over hers, the warmth of his nearness, the kindness in his restraint. The next morning he returned with Miguel, who worked for an hour, then excused himself with errands. The house seemed to change the second the door shut behind him. The silence stretched. Clara busied herself with wiping dust from the shelves, though her eyes kept drifting to Daniel's broad back as he adjusted strings. Finally she couldn't resist. "Play something for me." He hesitated, tools in hand. "It's not finished." "Neither am I." He gave a soft laugh, set the tools aside, and slid onto the bench. His fingers found a melody, melancholy but threaded with hope. Clara leaned against the doorway, watching the way his brow furrowed in concentration, the way his long fingers coaxed life from brokenness. When he finished, she clapped softly. "That was beautiful. It's nothing formal, just something I've been working on." "What inspired it?" He turned, eyes catching hers. "This house, this piano, you." The word lodged in her chest like lightning. She stepped forward before she could second-guess herself, stopping at the edge of the bench. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Daniel, I want you to be mine." The words shocked even her. They hung in the air, bold and unrepentant. Daniel's expression flickered. Surprise, hunger, and something heavier, like discipline trying to win a losing battle. He rose slowly, facing her fully. "Clara, do you know what you're saying?" "Yes." Her voice didn't shake. "I've thought about you every night since you walked in with that tool case, watching you bring this piano back to life. It's the most beautiful thing I've seen in years, and I want to know you beyond the man who fixes keys and strings." His jaw tightened. "It's unprofessional. I'm here to work on your piano, not me," she cut in. "What if I don't care about the rules?" Silence. His chest rose, fell. Then, slowly, he lifted his hand and brushed his thumb across her knuckles. Electricity shivered up her arm. "I've been thinking about you too," he admitted, his voice hushed, dangerous in its honesty. "More than I should." "Then stop fighting it," she whispered. The nearness became unbearable. Daniel bent, his lips brushing hers in the faintest kiss. Tentative, reverent, but enough to undo her. Clara's breath hitched, and when he pulled back, she followed, pressing her mouth to his with a certainty she didn't know she had. The kiss deepened, soft and slow, filled with restraint that barely masked desire. His hands framed her face, steady and careful, as though she were another precious instrument he vowed not to mishandle. When he finally pulled away, both of them breathless, his eyes searched hers. "Clara, if we cross this line, I don't go halfway. I want all of you. Your house, your music, your chaos, all of it." Her answer came without hesitation. "Then take me, all of me." Daniel's forehead rested against hers, his breath mingling with hers. "God help me," he whispered. "I think I already have." That night, Clara lay awake in her bed, the house alive with echoes of music and something new pulsing in her veins. The piano downstairs waited, its restoration nearly complete, but she knew the more fragile restoration was her own heart. She had opened a door, and Daniel had stepped through. Tomorrow would demand choices, practical, emotional, maybe painful. But for the first time in years, Clara wasn't afraid. She felt alive, and she knew with startling clarity this was only the beginning. The days that followed carried a new rhythm, one Clara hadn't felt in years. The Whitmore mansion, once heavy with silence, began to breathe again. Daniel arrived each morning with his tool case and that steady calm in his eyes. But now every brush of his hand against hers, every glance that lingered a moment too long, carried the weight of their shared secret. A kiss that had changed everything. They didn't talk about it, not directly. Daniel still worked with precise focus, coaxing hammers and strings into cooperation, while Clara hovered nearby, pretending to busy herself with her graphic design projects. Yet between scales and sandpaper, between screws tightened and notes tuned, their bond deepened like a song building toward crescendo. By the end of the week, the Steinway sang again. Its tone was rich, resonant, alive. Daniel sat at the bench, playing a Chopin prelude, the notes blooming through the tall ceilings. Clara listened from the doorway, arms folded, breath caught in her throat. The piano wasn't the only thing transformed. When he finished, silence filled the room like an exhale. Clara walked closer, her voice low. "It sounds like the house is awake." "It is," Daniel said, turning toward her. "But it's not just the piano, Clara. It's you. You're the one bringing life back here." Her chest tightened. She reached out, fingers brushing the polished wood. "I think I forgot how much beauty mattered. I've spent so long just surviving, juggling bills, trying not to lose this house, wanting things I couldn't afford to want." Daniel's eyes softened. "You don't have to apologize for wanting beauty, or love, or music. None of those are luxuries. They're the things that make the struggle worth it." The words landed deep. Clara's throat closed with unshed tears, and before she could stop herself, she leaned in, her hand resting on his shoulder. He covered it with his own, strong and steady. Neither moved away. That evening, Daniel invited her to the workshop he shared with his father and Miguel. The place was tucked behind an unassuming brick building near the old docks. Inside, Clara's breath caught. Pianos in every stage of rebirth filled the space. Uprights with missing keys, grands with their lids propped open, parts and strings neatly arranged on benches. The air smelled of wood, varnish and possibility. Robert Carter, Daniel's father, emerged from behind a walnut baby grand. He was silver-haired, broad-shouldered, with the same steady eyes as his son. "So you're the woman with the 1952 Steinway," he said, wiping his hands before shaking hers. "That's me," Clara replied, smiling nervously. "Your son worked magic on it." Robert's mouth curved faintly. "Daniel's got good ears, better than mine some days. But what matters most is his patience. He learned that from his mother." Something tender passed between father and son in that moment. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. Clara sensed the grief behind his quiet strength, and her heart ached. Miguel popped up with his usual cheer, clapping Daniel on the back. "She's seen the beast, then? That piano nearly bit my hand off." He winked at Clara. "You're lucky you called us. Most folks don't realize what treasure they have." Clara wandered among the instruments, fingertips brushing aged wood. "It's beautiful. Every piano looks like it has a story." "They do," Robert said. He pointed to a battered upright. "That one lived in a bordello, then a church, then sat in an attic for 30 years. Now it's headed to a school where kids can learn on it." Clara's chest warmed. "That's incredible. Music shouldn't only belong to people who can afford it." "Exactly," Daniel said. He looked at her with something like pride, as though she'd put words to a belief he'd carried all his life. Later that week, they sat together at the newly restored Steinway in Clara's living room. The air between them hummed with possibility. Daniel pressed a few notes, then shifted aside. "Play something," he said. Clara laughed nervously. "I'm still terrible." "Play anyway." She stumbled through Für Elise, her fingers clumsy but determined. The piano answered warmly, forgiving her mistakes. Daniel leaned closer, guiding her hands, his breath grazing her cheek. "You're not terrible," he murmured. "You're learning, and you're playing with heart, which matters more than perfection." The intimacy of the moment was unbearable. Clara turned, her lips inches from his. "Daniel," he stilled, eyes searching hers. "Clara, if we start this, I don't want casual. I don't want halfway." "Neither do I." Her voice trembled, but her conviction did not. "I've spent years with men who wanted me smaller, quieter, more practical. You make me feel seen, whole. I don't want to let that go." Daniel exhaled as if releasing a weight. He cupped her face, his thumb grazing her cheek. This time when he kissed her, it wasn't tentative. It was a promise. Slow, deep, certain. The piano hummed under their joined hands as though approving. When they pulled apart, Clara whispered, "So what now?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Now we keep playing." Their closeness did not go unnoticed. Charlotte Reed, Clara's neighbour, stopped by with muffins and a sly grin. "So the piano man's here every day, Hope he's fixing more than just strings." Clara flushed scarlet. "Charlotte?" "I'm just saying," Charlotte teased. "If he looks at you the way I think he does, you'd be a fool not to let him." Clara laughed nervously, but the truth in Charlotte's words lingered. That night, over takeout at the kitchen table, she broached the subject. "My neighbours are already talking." Daniel raised a brow. "Do you care?" Clara stirred her noodles. "Not about gossip, but I worry what people will think about us." His gaze was steady, unwavering. "What do you think?" She met his eyes. "I think I've never wanted anyone the way I want you." "Then let them talk," he said. "This is our music, not theirs." Her throat tightened. She reached across the table and he clasped her hand firmly. By late summer, their lives had found a shared rhythm. Clara designed logos by day, Daniel restored pianos by morning, and evenings belonged to music. They experimented with duets, Daniel guiding her through simple harmonies, Clara laughing when she fumbled. The house that once echoed with emptiness now vibrated with laughter, conversation, and chords that climbed toward hope. Still, challenges pressed in. Money remained tight, and Clara often lay awake wondering how she could keep both the mansion and the man she was falling for. Daniel, too, worried about honouring her legacy, about deserving her trust, about building a life that could withstand more than music. One evening, after finishing a duet, Clara closed the fall board and turned to him. Her voice was steady, though her heart thundered. "Daniel, I don't just want a restored piano. I want a restored life, with you." He drew in a slow breath, his eyes fierce with emotion. "Clara, you already have me. All of me." Their kiss that night was not tentative, not careful. It was the kiss of two people stepping into the unknown, together. For the first time in years, Clara believed the mansion was not too big for her, because now it wasn't hers alone. By autumn, the Whitmore mansion no longer felt like a relic. Laughter echoed through its high-ceilinged rooms, music poured from the Steinway, and the garden bloomed under Clara's renewed attention. What had once been her grandmother's house now felt like their home. Daniel's tool case sat by the piano almost permanently, his jacket hung on a hook by the door, and his cologne lingered faintly in the hallways. Clara often caught herself smiling at odd moments, while brushing her hair, while boiling water for tea, while adjusting sketches for a design client, because the memory of Daniel's touch would surface, grounding her. They had crossed a line in the music room weeks earlier, a kiss that deepened into something undeniable, and there was no turning back. Yet with intimacy came questions. One evening, after a long day of client calls and Daniel's workshop repairs, they sat on the porch steps with glasses of wine. The air was cool, filled with the hum of crickets and the distant sound of church bells. Clara leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever wonder if we're moving too fast?" she asked. Daniel was quiet for a moment, then kissed the top of her head. "Every day. But then I remember what it felt like the first time I played your piano. Like something in me had been waiting for that room, that moment, you. I don't think love follows clocks, Clara." Her throat tightened. "I'm scared. Not of us, of losing all this, of not being enough. For you, for the house, for the future." Daniel shifted to face her fully, his hand cupping her cheek. "You're more than enough. You always have been. The only thing that scares me is not making sure you know it." Her eyes stung. She kissed him, slow and aching, and thought, this man could carry my heart forever if I let him. Their closeness deepened, but not without friction. Clara's father, a retired banker with opinions sharper than knives, paid a visit. He surveyed Daniel with narrowed eyes, asking pointed questions about income, business stability, and long-term goals. Clara bristled, ready to defend, but Daniel remained calm, answering each question with measured confidence. Later, Clara apologized. "I should have stopped him." Daniel shook his head. "He's your father. He wants to know you're safe. I respect that. But Clara, I'm not going anywhere. He'll see that." He was right. Over dinner, her father watched the way Daniel guided Clara through conversation, the way his hands steadied hers when she grew flustered, and something in his expression softened. By the end of the evening, he raised his glass. "I was skeptical, Clara, but seeing you here alive again, I think you've made the right choice." Clara's eyes brimmed. Approval from her father had always been rare. Hearing it now felt like a blessing wrapped in astonishment. The weeks unfolded like pages in a novel neither of them wanted to end. They hosted Clara's college friend Grace, a music teacher, who immediately clicked with Daniel. Over wine and laughter, the three of them dreamed aloud about a community program that would provide instruments and lessons to children whose families couldn't afford private tuition. "Imagine this room filled with kids learning scales," Grace said, gesturing toward the music room. Daniel grinned. "It would sound like chaos at first. Beautiful chaos." Clara felt her heart swell. "I'd love that. Using this house for more than my memories, for something alive, something shared." They began sketching plans on napkins and notebooks. Daniel offered to refurbish old uprights for schools. Grace promised to rally teachers. Clara pledged to design marketing materials and seek grants. What began as a whimsical idea turned into a seed of purpose. But not all opportunities were rooted in Charleston. In early December, Clara received an email from a prestigious design firm in Atlanta. They offered her an art director position, triple her current income, a chance to cement herself in the industry. For hours she stared at the screen, torn between ambition and the life she was building here. When she told Daniel, his reaction was steady, though his jaw tightened. "It's an incredible offer. You'd be brilliant at it." "You don't want me to take it." "I want you to be happy," he said carefully. "If that means Atlanta, I'll support you. We can try long distance." She studied his face, searching for what he wouldn't say. "But what do you want?" His eyes finally broke guard. "I want you here, with me, with this house, this piano, this program we're dreaming up. But I want you to choose it, not because of me, but because it's what your heart wants." Clara cried that night, out of love, out of fear, out of the knowledge that she had to choose. The next morning, she emailed Atlanta with a polite refusal. Her heart had already chosen. Christmas Eve came with Charleston glowing in garlands and candlelit windows. Daniel invited her on a morning walk through the historic district. The air was crisp, their breath visible as they strolled hand in hand. He stopped suddenly outside Magnolia's, the restaurant where they had shared their first official date. Clara blinked, confused. "Daniel?" He turned, pulling something from his coat pocket, a small velvet box. Her knees went weak. "Clara Whitmore," he said, his voice steady but trembling at the edges. "The day you let me into your grandmother's house, you changed my life. You made me believe in love, in legacy, in building something worth keeping. You are my music, my home, my forever. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision. She nodded furiously, words spilling between sobs. "Yes, yes, absolutely, yes." Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, a vintage piece that had belonged to his mother, a circle of diamonds catching the morning light. He kissed her, long and fierce, as church bells rang in the distance. Passers-by clapped. Clara laughed through tears, her world remade in a single moment. The wedding came in spring, beneath blooming azaleas in the Whitmore garden. Friends, family, and even some of the children from their new music program gathered to celebrate. Daniel stood at the altar in a navy suit, eyes never leaving hers. Clara walked toward him in a lace gown, her curves embraced by the fabric, her grandmother's pearls at her throat. The vows they spoke were simple, but they carried the weight of truth. "The piano brought us together," Clara said, her voice breaking. "But it's your kindness, Daniel, your belief in me, that made me fall in love." "And I vow," Daniel replied, "to keep listening to your music, even on the days you can't hear it yourself. To make a home with you, to love you in strength and in silence, forever." When the minister declared them husband and wife, their kiss erupted into cheers. Clara felt the house itself rejoice. The same walls that had held her grief now resonated with joy. Months later, after the music program had launched and their home was filled with students' laughter, Clara sat at the Steinway cradling their newborn daughter, Eleanor Grace. The baby had Daniel's eyes and Clara's chin, and she seemed to calm whenever piano music played. Daniel leaned over the bench, brushing a kiss against Clara's hair. "She's going to be musical," he said softly. Or stubborn, Clara teased, smiling. Maybe both. As Daniel began to play a gentle lullaby, Clara hummed along, rocking their daughter. The house glowed with lamplight, filled with warmth and life. Clara thought back to the first day Daniel had stepped into her home, carrying his tool case and quiet confidence. He had come to fix a piano. Instead, he had restored her heart. The future stretched before them like an unfinished score, unknown, full of risk, but theirs to compose together. And Clara knew, with bone-deep certainty, that some love stories truly begin with broken pianos and end with lives made whole.